playing with the contrast in this picture to try and get a better picture of the pattern on Morgan's swimsuit. It's from Nolan's mom's Instagram from the day after he went missing. This was the picture that she was sent. Oh, these little liars. I told y'all that Jax was the ringleader. I told y'all. He sat in this interview and he was telling stories about shit that he wasn't even there to witness. So let's break down some of the stuff that I heard in this interview.
What if the photographs sent to a grieving mother weren't exactly what they appeared to be? What if the skyline behind a boat could expose a problem with the photograph itself? And what if, buried inside this investigation, there are questions about a fourth boat, a disputed audio recording, an unsearched vessel, and a young man who has almost completely disappeared from the public conversation? Tonight, we're putting all of those pieces together. A photograph is supposed to preserve a moment. One location, one frame, one piece of reality frozen in time. But when investigators examined photographs connected to the Nolan Wells case, they noticed something strange. The foreground appeared to line up. The rope appeared to line up. The black loop on the boat appeared to line up. But the skyline behind the boat appeared to change. And that's where this story gets interesting. Because buildings don't move. The coastline doesn't move. The horizon doesn't suddenly relocate. So what happened? Was the photograph altered? Was a different image used? Or is there another explanation that hasn't been publicly established? Then there is the boat. Questions surrounding the Triton. Questions surrounding the 6 p.m. timeline. Questions about the sea tow audio. Questions about Edward Pulsick. And questions about Bart Edmonson's almost complete absence from the public narrative. Today, we're going to let you hear the investigative material without interruption first. Then, after all 4 cuts play, I'll break down what they actually mean, what remains unproven, and which questions I believe investigators should be asking next. You're watching ColdCase Watch Central. And before we get into it, subscribe to the channel if you want us to continue following this case as new information develops. And I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city, state, or country in the comments right now. Let's get into the evidence.
Now, as a follow-up to my last video, I wanted to show you this. This is from Nolan's mom's Instagram from the day after he went missing. This was the picture that she was sent. So naturally, these 2 pictures should line up, right? So what I did is I made sure to line up this little like black loopy thing here. I made sure to line up this part of the boat and this like rope here. Now watch. Look at the difference here. Look at that. He's barely moving. And the entire skyline is different. You can say, oh, these are different pictures and like people just moved slightly, but the skyline wouldn't fucking change. So what were they hiding? Because it seems to me they didn't want people to see this boat or this green boat. Like, the skyline doesn't change over here. Look, it's in the same place. It's just over here. So 100% from the get-go, they were tampering with photographs. Absolutely nothing that they've given anybody can be trusted. I am about to wipe Evil Murr's smile clean off his face because this man is a joke. So yesterday I was playing with the contrast in this picture to try and get a better picture of the pattern on Morgan's swimsuit. I realized that half of this picture is not changing at all when I play with the shadows, which is an indicator to me of a photograph being altered. So then I started scrutinizing this picture because why would I ever have reason to doubt it before? And then that's when I noticed this boat seam underneath all of their legs. You can almost trace it all the way until you get to Nolan. Not only are these creases in different places, but there's no shadow, nothing underneath his legs here. In fact, if you look really closely, make sure your brightness is turned all the way up, you can see a seam right here that just stops. And that would connect over here. Then I saw in between this elbow here, look, there is so much fabric that's supposedly his shorts. Not to mention a very intimate hand placement. I mean, that elbow is going all the way up to them hips. And then look, in between Morgan's legs, like, why does this shadow suddenly stop? You can see a seam here and then nothing. And then look at the way Nolan is holding this can. Got one finger like over the lid, but the can looks really like wide. And then his thumb is on the other side of the lid. Like, how would you hold something like that? Now look at this half of the picture. Notice how Nolan's head is casting a shadow going to the left. Same with Eric here. Head casting shadow to the left. Which means right where I am on the screen would be the direction that the sun would be coming from. And yet his shadow is going straight down, and his shadow is going straight down and to the right, implying that their light source, their sun, is coming from over here. So is this picture fake? Then I started looking at the photos that they gave to Officer Tatum. Why is Nolan a giant? He and Jax are literally almost the same build and height. And I understand that perspective's a thing, but not when they're this close to each other. Not when the camera is right here. And look, same problem with this one with the shadows. Shadow going this way, shadow going this way, shadow going this way, shadow going this way, shadow going straight up and down, shadow straight up and down, straight up and down, straight up and down, straight up and down, to the left. And this jacuzzi tub looks normal at first until you zoom in. First off, why is his elbow blending into his hat? Why is his chest an Audi? And whose fucking face is that? Because that looks like AI tried to recreate this guy. This is another picture of Nolan with them, and I'm like, why does his eyes look swollen shut? Why his neck as big as his head? But get ready, folks. I'm about ready to blow their little he wasn't on the Triton picture out of the fucking water. Because right here is Morgan's swim trunks. You can see his like beads here, his glasses, his hat. But I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on in this picture. Then I was comparing these two videos and I realized, oh wait, it's a visor. It's a visor hanging off of this. See, there's the bill and like the little like part there. But as I was comparing these two pictures, something fucking hit me. Look at black part, metal, white plastic, metal, visor. Black part, metal part, white plastic, no metal pole. Look at the steering wheel. The steering wheel has this like white flap thing that's going on here. What? No white. But look, there's the door. There's the door. What's going on here with this leg? I don't know. Now, do you guys see it? Can you see it? Vertical bars, horizontal bars, vertical, horizontal. And it's not just that the vertical bars are missing. There is no horizontal bar like right here. And not only that, y'all see how there's like this curved bar here? Where's the bar in this picture? It should be going right next to the hat, like right into it. And yet we have nothing here. And I know y'all have lots of questions and I can't pretend like I have any answers to them. Where we had left off, Warren had already called Miss Christine and then they somehow ended up at Jax's grandparents' house. That's where they all stayed that weekend, and so that's why Nolan's keys were over there. They had to have been at the grandparents' house, who mysteriously never showed up during any of these confrontations. Somehow the phone had gone from the party that they were all at to Jax's place, and then Warren left after a phone call to Morgan. According to them, 10 to 15 people showed up and just walked into Jax's house and demanded the phone. Wyatt gave the address in which the boat was at. They all start migrating over there. Then Morgan and Wyatt and another friend are tracking their 360s and seeing that they're going over to Wyatt's house. Then they call 911 to tell them that the police are on the way to his house. Then they're searching the boat, and then they come back to Jax's house around 1 o'clock in the morning, according to him. Mind you, that's when they explain to the police about their friend being missing. And so then the report says at 1:38 in the morning, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office say that they spoke to several of the friends that were on the vessel with Nolan, saying that he was in the company of an unknown female. But Morgan, Jax, and Warren all claimed that they did not travel to the island on the same boat as Nolan. So who did they talk to? Because it sounds to me like they had told the police that they were on the same boat as him. Keeping in mind that this is what Warren told Miss Christine.
Named Katie. And so then it turned into, Katie is also missing. No one can find her. And the explanation of no one knows this Katie, like we've never met her.
And Triton said this.
I was talking on my other buddy's phone, talking to Warren. He was dialing Coast Guard because he hung up the phone and was like, hey, this is them, bye, and hung up the phone. And that was the last time I talked to him.
Mind you, Triton is friends with Katie. They are mutuals. I have confirmed this. So now that we've got that timeline fucking straight, let's back up to something that Warren said during this interview.
If you're motivated enough to do it, yeah. Like, I made a phone call to my mom, and I had to call her like 8 times before she picked up because either her service was bad because she was on the back side of the aisle on the south side, or my service was bad, and it was just hard to get through.
Do y'all see that? Let me play it again slower for you.
Either her service was bad because she was on the back side of the aisle on the south side, or my service was bad, and It was just hard to get
Oh no. Not only did Warren confirm that his mom was on the south side of the island, but Warren himself said that if you're motivated enough, you can call somebody. I tried calling my mom 8 times. Yet this is what he said last time.
a little off the island. You have cell coverage, and even on the island, like I called my mom when we were on the island, it was fine.
So which is it? Did you call your mom with ease, or did you try to call her 8 times because you were motivated to get in touch with her? But Warren wasn't the only one to slip up, because listen.
And he's on the phone with Cito, and he's trying to get them on the phone. And as he stated in the moment, he's like, Cito's just asking all these dumb questions. I can't, figure out what's going on. And so finally hangs up, and after the trim to the motor started to work again. So they manually trim it down by the buttons on the motor, trimmed it down, and some electronics started to come back on. And they got the boat to crank over, and they're like, all right, untie us.
So first off, Jax just proved that the boys put the phone on mute during the call with Cito. Because I've listened to the entire 8-minute call, and at no point did they ever say anything about them asking all these stupid questions. Then he said after they hung up on the Cito, that's when it started working again, and they said, okay, untie us, implying that it had been tied up to the other boat the entire time. But we see in this video that they are hauling the line back in right here as he's on the phone. See, you can see right here where the line is being pulled in from across the way where the boat is stationed. Meaning he had already hung up with Cito at that point, and he had to have been on the phone with someone else. And what we see here is, once again, we have an interview where they go into so much detail about stuff that doesn't fucking matter.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and first off explain a boat.
We fucking get how a bilge pump works. We get it by now. Stop fucking talking about the bilge pump. What we actually want to hear about is the multiple stops that were made before ending up back at the grandparents' house before they even took the boat to the boat dock. We want you guys to explain how the Cito was canceled by the grandfather on the captain's private line before you guys had even hung up with Cito. That's why nobody believes a fucking word that you are saying. Because I showed y'all yesterday how AI had clearly doctored these photos. If you missed it, look, silver pole. Look, no silver pole. It's actually white. And if you look at this picture in the grandparents' driveway of the Triton, you will see that the little handrails are not leaning over. You will see that the rails are going straight up and down and not leaning, which is why I also suspect that the identity of whoever this is was intentionally covered up. Because first off, who wears this weird swimsuit thing? This is somebody who, if they were with them, would have stood out in a crowd. But this woman who's in a red striped swimsuit with a white baseball cap shows up in a lot of different pictures, just oh so obscured. Here she is again, handing out beers on Bart's boat. So I personally suspect that whoever that was in fact on the Triton, and they used AI to change her clothing and to obscure her identity. Because I think this was either Warren's mother or Wyatt's stepmother, which would explain the older female voice people have said they've heard on the Cito. Because otherwise, why would he need to call his mother 8 times? Unless, according to his own words,
If you're motivated enough to do it, yeah.
because remember, there is a 4th boat out there. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Holy fuck, I just accidentally stumbled onto something that literally is concrete proof. Oh my god, next video coming, oh my god! Oh, these little liars. I told y'all that Jax was the ringleader. I told y'all, he sat in this interview and he was telling stories about shit that he wasn't even there to witness. So let's break down some of the stuff that I heard in this interview. Let's start with Warren's first phone call, because y'all will remember that Warren said that he was over at Ava's house for that 4th of July party when they all started realizing that Nolan was missing, and he called Miss Christine at 11 o'clock.
One of the first things I told Miss Christine Wells in the first phone call that ever occurred with anything to do with Nolan Wells being gone, because I was the first person to call Miss Christine about anything. First phone call, anything to do with Nolan Wells, was me making a phone call to Christine Wells. And one of the first things I said to her, with multiple witnesses here, pull up the phone call if you want. She said, oh, well, Nolan's location is with y'all at, where the house we were at. And I was like, well, no, he left his phone with us. I told her this.
And yesterday, the same time that this interview came out, Christine Wells said this.
360 says that he's on land, and he was like, well, no, I mean, when We have his phone.
So both versions of the story say that Warren didn't tell her about the phone until after she confronted him with the 360. Now, Warren tells Miss Christine that he knows somebody in the Coast Guard and that he's going to call them, which is very fucking different than calling the Coast Guard, which absolutely explains why the Coast Guard came out and said at first that they had not received a call from the kids that night. The Coast Guard's initial statement said they weren't informed until 12:30. Then the Coast Guard later changed their story and said, oh wait, actually we did. And it seems to me that that first call was most likely an off-the-record to a friend kind of deal, which means these people freaked out and didn't call the Coast Guard until after all these people showed up at Jax's house. Which would explain why in the course of this interview it went from Warren called the Coast Guard to we did. Now, when the subject turns to how the family got the phone back from these boys, you'll notice that there was a couple slip-ups.
Warren, you weren't at the house, and so you weren't there when they came to get the phone and all that. So
now remember, Warren just said that he wasn't at the house when the phone was got. And then Morgan talks about getting a phone call from one of the people in Christine Wells' group.
And how did they get the phone back?
So I got a call from a kid we went to high school with. He called me just asking me questions. He saw people posting on Snapchat, like the picture that was circulating.
Except this picture wasn't posted until July 5th. So how could this picture have been circulating on Snapchat that night? But let's continue.
And he called and he was asking questions. He was like, where's Nolan? When's the last time y'all seen him? And then he was like, so where are y'all at? And I told him, I said, we're at Jax's house. And then Warren got on the phone, and I don't know. So they come to my house, right? And they kind of
hold on before we get there. Was it confrontational or was it just just trying to find? It was confrontational already.
Wouldn't y'all agree? He was 110%. He was very confrontational.
And when did was this on the night of the 4th or the next day?
This was the night when this was before they came and got the phone. So this is the night of the 4th, yes.
You guys are missing a part of the story. How did you get from Ava's house to Jax's house? Because Miss Christine is watching you guys on the Life 360. So suddenly she's seeing the phone leave one location and go to another. Of course I would be upset. And now all of a sudden Warren is there when the phone stuff starts happening? He's listening to the phone call? Now I need y'all to remember that Warren also said that the phone was in his truck on the first conversation, as we have from this report. Meaning if we were to believe Warren that he was not there when everybody showed up looking for the phone at some time in between 11 and 1 a.m., so then that would mean after they heard this angry phone call, Warren gets the phone out of his vehicle and puts it in Jack's house and then leaves.
There's probably like 10, 15 people in my house I don't even know. And they're all up in our faces, going crazy, asking where Nolan is, and we don't know. And finally they get into Wyatt's face, and they're like, where's your boat? Where's the boat at? Demanding his address. Demanding his address and stuff like that. And he finally ends up giving it to him. We give them the phone. They have the phone at this point. Then they get the address to his house. Then they go to his house. And they're searching all over his boat, what I heard and stuff like that. Well, anyways, I don't really know much about that. But they come back to my house at around 1 o'clock in the morning. We called law enforcement. I was with Wyatt at the time after we left Jax's house that night. I was with Wyatt, and one person we were with saw that their location was headed towards Wyatt's house. And so Wyatt got on the phone with 911 and was like, hey, these people are on the way to my house or already at my house. My mom and my dad are there alone, and they know nothing about this. But Wyatt's mom actually, when they were looking at the boat, they were actually walking from the boat, and she came out and started talking to them.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Wyatt, Morgan, and Jax were all together. Warren was gone for some reason at this point. 10 to 15 people just barge into your house. Don't know why your grandparents weren't around. That might explain some things, huh? Guess y'all had the house all to your fucking self that weekend. But then they ask Wyatt for his address so that they can go look at the boat. Wyatt gives them the address. They start heading over there. Wyatt and Morgan get into a car and leave Jax's house. Somebody else that you were with that we aren't hearing about is tracking someone else's phone. I don't know if it was somebody who was with the group that they had access to, or if they were tracking Nolan's phone and they saw it was heading to Wyatt's house. And even though Wyatt gave them the address, and instead of calling his parents, he calls 911 and tells them, my parents don't know anything about that's going on. Can you send police over there? Now, mind you, it was about half an hour after being on the phone with Warren that Christine was able to actually call and report him missing. But she was having to go back and forth and go down to all these different agencies because nobody would fucking help her. And frankly, I want to know why all of this confrontation was left out of the fucking report. Like, if this family had to be removed from 2 different properties by the police, why is there no record of that? And in fact, it wasn't until after these confrontations that MDMR and Ocean Springs Police apparently had their little conversations about who was going to be taking over the case. Because remember, the Jackson County Sheriff Lieutenant told them that deputies had spoken with several friends that had traveled to the island on the vessel with Nolan, and that when they were left, he was in the company of an unknown female. So now, even though Warren had supposedly called the Coast Guard, all these family members are telling the police that the kid is missing. These are the people that last saw them. They're all like, we last saw him on the island. Still, the deputies said that they did not have reason to believe that there was any water-related exigencies or emergencies. Don't worry, y'all. I've got a lot fucking more to say about this stuff, so come back for part 2. I'm going to be immediately recording it because Warren fucked up pretty badly in this interview, and I'll show you why.
Take a breath, because what you just watched is where this case becomes considerably more complicated. 4 separate lines of inquiry, 4 different pieces of the puzzle, and they all point toward the same fundamental question: what actually happened during those critical hours surrounding Nolan Wells' disappearance? But before we go any further, I want to establish something important. There is a difference between an investigative lead, an allegation, and a proven fact. A photograph that appears manipulated deserves forensic examination. A disputed timeline deserves verification. An unusual attorney connection deserves context. An absent witness deserves questions. But none of those things automatically proves criminal wrongdoing. And that's important, because this channel isn't here to declare someone guilty because a TikTok investigator found something suspicious. We're here to ask, can the evidence actually withstand scrutiny? And if it can, where does it lead? Let's start with the photographs. This is probably the most visually powerful claim from the investigation. The investigator takes 2 photographs and attempts to align recognizable elements on the boat: the rope, the black loop, the structure of the vessel. And when those elements appear to line up, the investigator points to a major difference in the background: the skyline. Now, that immediately sounds damning. But this is where we need to be careful. 2 photographs taken from different positions can produce different perspectives. Camera lenses can distort backgrounds. Objects can appear to move because of parallax. Compression can also affect images. So simply showing that 2 backgrounds look different is not by itself proof of Photoshop. But that's also why the next step matters: forensic verification. If the original files can be obtained, investigators can examine metadata creation dates, editing history, original resolution, compression signatures, pixel-level inconsistencies, layer artifacts, whether the background was cloned or replaced. And that's the evidence I want to see. Because if an original file can demonstrate that the background was digitally replaced, that changes everything. At that point, we're no longer dealing with an internet theory. We're dealing with a documented alteration. But until that forensic examination is publicly established, the responsible conclusion is the photographs contain an alleged discrepancy that deserves independent verification. And that distinction matters. Then we have the Triton. The boat itself is potentially one of the most important physical pieces of evidence in this entire case. Because unlike a social media post, a boat can be examined. Its structure can be documented. Its hardware can be photographed. Its electronics can be analyzed. Its compartments can be searched. And biological evidence can potentially be tested. That's why the question raised during the Nancy Grace interview matters. Was the vessel thoroughly searched? Was forensic testing performed? Was biological evidence collected? Was the boat preserved? And if it was searched, what did investigators find? The answer to those questions should exist somewhere in an investigative record. And that's where I think the conversation needs to go. Not, the boat definitely contains evidence. We don't know that. But, if the boat is central to the timeline, what forensic examination was performed on it? That's a completely reasonable question. Then there is the claim that Nolan was seen alive around 6 p.m. If that sighting is legitimate and independently verified, it could be extremely important. Because timelines can eliminate possibilities. If Nolan was definitely alive at a specific location at 6 p.m., investigators can use that information to narrow the window they're examining. But we need more information. Who were the witnesses? When did they report seeing Nolan? What exactly did they see? How long did they see him? Did they know him personally? Were they shown photographs? Were their statements documented? And can anything else corroborate the sighting? Those questions don't invalidate the claim. They strengthen it if the answers check out. That's how evidence works. Now let's talk about Edward Pulsick. The investigator highlighted his previous representation of Joe McCann following Ashley Jana's death in Tanzania. That is an interesting professional connection. But let's keep this firmly grounded. Attorneys represent many clients. Representing two people connected to separate high-profile cases does not establish that the cases are connected. It doesn't prove misconduct. It doesn't establish guilt. What it does provide is context about the attorney's professional history. And that's worth knowing. The more important question is what Pulsick is saying now. What claims is he making? What evidence supports those claims? What questions is he answering? And what questions is he declining to answer? That's where the focus belongs. Then we get to Bart Edmonson. His absence has become one of the more noticeable aspects of this investigation. We've seen other people connected to the case participate in interviews. We've seen attorneys speak. We've seen coaches address questions. But Bart himself has remained largely absent from the public discussion. Now, silence isn't evidence of guilt. That's important. Anyone involved in a sensitive investigation has the right to consult an attorney and avoid public interviews. But from an investigative standpoint, his absence creates unanswered questions. What was Bart's timeline? Where was he? What vessel was he connected to? Who was with him? What communications does he have? What evidence can corroborate his account? Those questions can be answered without assuming guilt. And that's exactly how they should be approached. The CTO recording is another area where emotion needs to give way to forensic analysis. There are competing interpretations of what can be heard. Some investigators believe enhanced audio reveals additional voices. Others dispute those interpretations. So what should happen? Go back to the original recording. Analyze the original file. Examine the waveform. Separate the channels. Determine whether the allegedly suspicious sounds are actually present. Compare the original recording against every enhanced version. And determine whether the enhancement introduced artifacts. That's how you settle an audio dispute. Not by yelling louder. Not by saying, "I hear it," and not by saying, "You can't hear it." The question is, what does the original recording contain? And then there is the fourth boat. This is where the different pieces of the investigation potentially intersect. If another vessel was present during the critical period, investigators need to establish who owned it, who was operating it, who was aboard. Where was it? When was it there? Was it communicating with anyone? Did anyone photograph it? Did any phone or GPS data place it there? And most importantly, can its presence be independently verified? Because if a fourth boat can be established through objective evidence, it could become an important part of reconstructing the timeline. But until that happens, we should call it what it is, an investigative question, not a proven fact. And that's where all of this comes together. The photographs, the Triton, the 6 p.m. sighting, the attorney connection, the CTO audio, Bart's absence, and the possibility of another vessel. None of these, standing alone, establishes what happened to Nolan. But together, they demonstrate why this case continues to generate questions. And there is one thing that could cut through Virtually all of these arguments, the original evidence, original photographs, original audio, phone records, Life 360 data, security footage, boat records, witness statements, forensic reports. That's what matters. Because the internet can debate a photograph for 1,000 hours, but an original file can be examined. People can argue over what they think they hear in an audio clip, but the original recording can be analyzed. People can debate where a boat was, but GPS and phone records can potentially establish movements. That's why I keep coming back to the same principle. Follow the evidence. And through all of this, we cannot forget the person at the center of it. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He was someone's son, someone's friend, someone's child. And whatever ultimately happened on that 4th of July, his family deserves answers that can withstand scrutiny. Not rumors, not internet mythology, not public relations battles. Answers. That's why these discrepancies matter. Not because they're entertaining, not because they generate clicks, but because every unanswered question represents another piece of the timeline that still needs to be understood. So now I want to hear from you. After watching the 4 investigative cuts and hearing the breakdown, which issue stands out to you the most? Is it the shifting skyline in the photographs? The questions surrounding the Triton? The alleged 6 p.m. sighting? The Edward Pulsick connection? Bart Edmonson's absence? The disputed CETO audio? Or the possibility of a 4th boat? Tell me what you think in the comments. But here's the rule. Separate what you believe from what you can actually prove. That's how we're going to approach this case on ColdCase Watch Central. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications because we're going to continue following this investigation as new information comes out. And I want one more thing from you before you leave. Tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city, state, or country below. I want to see just how far the ColdCase Watch Central community reaches. And if you know someone who's been following the Nolan Wells investigation, share this video with them. Because the more people who examine the evidence carefully, the harder it becomes for important questions to simply disappear. Until next time, stay safe, stay skeptical, and keep watching. This is ColdCase Watch Central.